The champagne bubbles caught the ballroom's crystal chandelier light like tiny diamonds, each one mocking me as I watched my wife lean against the mahogany podium. Lena looked stunning in her emerald dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary 3 months ago. The same dress she'd worn to what she called client dinners 4 times since then. 200 employees of Meridian Financial filled the downtown hotel ballroom, their laughter echoing off marble walls as Damon Vossel commanded attention from the microphone. Silver-haired, sharp-suited, and radiating the kind of confidence that came with a 7-figure salary and 0 accountability, he raised his crystal flute toward my wife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon's voice carried that practiced smoothness of a man who'd never been told no. "I'd like to thank my most valuable employee for everything she does, especially after hours." The crowd erupted in knowing chuckles. Colleagues nudged each other with elbows. Someone in the back whistled. My wife smiled that radiant smile I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago, the one that now made my stomach twist into knots. I remained seated at table 14, watching this performance while my untouched salmon grew cold. Cole Merrick, husband of the year, applauding politely while my marriage dissolved in champagne and corporate innuendo. Lena's dedication to our clients extends far beyond normal business hours, Damon continued, his eyes locked on my wife's face. She's always willing to go the extra mile, to work late into the night, to handle the most sensitive accounts with personal attention. More laughter. Louder this time. I recognized the faces around me, people I'd met at previous company events, neighbors from our subdivision, parents from Sophie's school. They were all in on the joke except me. Or so they thought. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the polished floor. The sound cut through the laughter like a blade. Conversations died in ripples, spreading outward from my table until the entire ballroom fell into uncomfortable silence. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly without the microphone. "I'd like to propose a toast as well." Damon's face shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion. Lena's smile flickered, her green eyes finding mine across the room with a look I'd never seen before. Pure panic. I lifted my champagne flute, the crystal catching the light just like all the others. "I'd like to thank you too, Damon. Your wife Nora and I have become very close while you two work late." The silence that followed wasn't the polite quiet of an audience waiting for a punchline. This was the suffocating stillness that comes when everyone realizes they've witnessed something that can't be taken back. Nora Marlin sat 3 tables away, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around her wine glass. She didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. Damon's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His face cycled through confusion, realization, and finally rage. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Oh, come on, Damon," I said, taking a sip of champagne. The bubbles tasted like victory. "If we're sharing professional relationships publicly, shouldn't we share personal ones too? Nora's been very understanding about your extended work schedule. We've had plenty of time to discuss your dedication to employee relations." The lie rolled off my tongue smooth as silk. I'd never spoken more than pleasantries with Nora Marlin, but the beauty of a well-timed falsehood is that truth becomes irrelevant. What mattered was the seed of doubt, planted in public soil and watered with humiliation. Lena stepped away from the podium, her heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor. "Cole, stop this right now." "Stop what?" I asked, my voice carrying the innocent confusion of a man who'd simply misunderstood the rules of engagement. "I thought we were celebrating workplace relationships. Isn't that what this is about?" The crowd began to murmur, a low buzz of whispered conversations and shuffling feet. Cell phones emerged from purses and jacket pockets. In 30 seconds, this moment would be preserved forever in digital amber. Damon stepped down from the podium, his face flushed red above his silver tie. "You're out of line, Merrick." "Am I?" I set my champagne flute on the table with deliberate care. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everyone here knows something about my wife's work habits that I'm just now figuring out. The murmur grew louder. I caught fragments of conversation floating through the air like smoke. Did you know? I heard rumors. Well, that explains. Lena reached my table, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. We're leaving. Now. Actually, I said, straightening my tie with the same casual precision Damon had used at the podium, I think I'll stay for dinner. The salmon looks excellent, and I'd hate to waste the company's money on an empty seat. I sat back down, picked up my fork, and took a bite. The fish tasted like cardboard, but I chewed slowly, savoring every second of the chaos erupting around me. Damon stormed toward my table, his composure cracking like ice in spring. You want to do this here? In front of everyone? Do what? I asked, cutting another piece of salmon. Have dinner? Enjoy my wife's company Christmas party? Celebrate her professional achievements? Cole. Lena's voice carried a warning I'd heard before, usually when Sophie tracked mud through the house or left toys scattered across the living room. Don't make this worse. I looked up at her, this woman I'd loved since college, who'd given me a beautiful daughter and 12 years of what I'd thought was happiness. Worse than what exactly? She didn't answer. She couldn't answer, not here, not with 200 pairs of eyes watching our marriage implode in real time. Security guards appeared at the edges of my vision, hotel staff moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd handled disruptions before. The party was over, even if the music still played softly in the background. Mr. Merrick, one of the guards said, approaching with careful diplomacy. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private. That won't be necessary, I said, standing again. I was just leaving. I walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. As I reached the ballroom doors, I turned back to face the crowd one final time. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I called out, and remember, the most valuable employees are always willing to work late. The parking garage elevator carried me down into fluorescent-lit silence. My hands didn't shake until I reached my car, and even then, it was more adrenaline than fear. I'd just detonated a bomb in the middle of my life, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed with a text message. Sophie, staying overnight at my sister's house, had sent a picture of the cookies they'd baked together. Chocolate chip, slightly burned around the edges, perfect in their imperfection. I started the engine and drove home through empty December streets, Christmas lights blinking in windows like distant stars. Tomorrow would bring consequences, phone calls, lawyers, difficult conversations with a 10-year-old who deserved better than parents who'd forgotten how to love each other. But tonight, for the first time in 18 months, I wasn't the only one who couldn't sleep. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Not emptier, Lena hadn't come home yet, but somehow lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying had finally been set down. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my home office, staring at the computer screen that had become my confessional over the past 6 weeks. The spreadsheet glowed in the darkness, 47 rows of data that told the story of my marriage's slow dissolution. Column A, dates. Column B, Lena's stated location. Column C, Damon's calendar, scraped from the company's public scheduling system. Column D, correlation probability. 93% accuracy over the past 18 months. I'd started tracking the patterns in October, after Sophie asked why Mommy was never home for dinner anymore. What began as casual curiosity had evolved into forensic accounting. Every client dinner cross-referenced with Damon's availability. Every quarterly review that coincidentally aligned with his business trips. Every late night that somehow corresponded with his wife's book club meetings. The data didn't lie. People did. My phone rang at 11:30. Lena's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 11:45, then midnight. By 12:15, she'd left 6 messages I hadn't listened to. I opened my laptop and began typing. The email draft sat in my folder marked Personal Projects, a euphemism that would have made Damon proud. Subject line: Timeline Documentation. Recipient: my brother-in-law, Silas, who worked cybersecurity for a firm downtown and owed me favors dating back to his wedding. Need a consultation on data recovery, I typed. Personal matter. Urgent but discreet. Can pay your usual rate. Silas responded within minutes. How urgent? Tonight. On my way. Silas arrived at 1:30 in the morning, carrying a laptop bag and 2 cups of coffee from the 24-hour diner on 5th Street. He was 3 years younger than me, built like a marathon runner, with the kind of nervous energy that made him excellent at finding hidden information and terrible at sitting still. This is about Lena, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. It wasn't a question. What makes you say that? Because you look like someone who's been punched in the stomach for 6 months, and because my sister mentioned some interesting rumors at the grocery store yesterday. I showed him the spreadsheet. He studied it for 10 minutes without speaking, occasionally nodding or making small notes on a legal pad. This is thorough, he said finally. Obsessively thorough, but it's all circumstantial. That's why you're here. You want me to hack your wife's accounts. I want you to recover data that belongs to me. Joint accounts, shared devices, household property, nothing that requires breaking any laws. Silas leaned back in his chair, considering. What exactly are you hoping to find? Confirmation. And if you find it? Then I'll know for certain instead of just suspecting. He opened his laptop and began connecting cables to my home router. This might take a while. You should probably get some sleep. I'll wait. The recovery process took 4 hours. Silas worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon, his fingers dancing across the keyboard while lines of code scrolled past on multiple screens. I dozed fitfully in my recliner, waking periodically to the sound of his quiet cursing or triumphant whispers. At 5:30, he shook my shoulder gently. Cole, you need to see this. The evidence spread across his laptop screen like a digital autopsy. 14 months of text messages, recovered from Lena's cloud backup. Hotel receipts charged to credit cards I'd never seen. Photographs that made my chest tight with a pain I hadn't expected. But the real discovery sat in a folder marked Cayman Investments. Joint account, Silas said quietly. Opened 8 months ago. Both their names on it. Current balance just over $200,000. I stared at the numbers, trying to process what I was seeing. Where did the money come from? That's the interesting part. He opened another window, showing a series of wire transfers. Meridian Financial client accounts. Small amounts, transferred monthly. Nothing large enough to trigger automatic flags, but it adds up. They're stealing from clients? Looks more like skimming, taking small percentages from investment returns, routing them through shell companies, then depositing clean money in the Cayman account. The bourbon I'd consumed hours earlier turned to acid in my stomach. This wasn't just adultery anymore. This was federal crime territory, the kind that came with prison sentences and asset forfeiture. Silas, I said slowly, I need you to make copies of everything. Already done. He handed me an encrypted thumb drive. But Cole, you need to understand what you're holding. This isn't just marriage counseling material. This is evidence of securities fraud. The front door opened downstairs. Lena's heels clicked across the hardwood floor, followed by the sound of her purse hitting the kitchen counter. She was home. Pack up, I whispered to Silas. Use the back door. He gathered his equipment with practiced efficiency, leaving through the sliding door that led to our backyard. I heard his car start in the alley behind our house, just as Lena's footsteps began climbing the stairs. I closed the laptop and slipped the thumb drive into my desk drawer beneath a stack of Sophie's old school papers. When Lena appeared in the doorway of my office, I was sitting in my recliner with a book open on my lap, pretending to read. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" She stepped into the room, still wearing the emerald dress from the party. Her makeup had been touched up, but I could see the exhaustion around her eyes. "What you did tonight was inexcusable." "Which part?" "All of it. The lies about Nora, the public humiliation, the way you embarrassed me in front of my colleagues." I marked my place in the book and set it aside. "Embarrassed you?" "Yes." "Do you have any idea what you've done to my career?" "Probably about as much damage as you've done to our marriage." She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture I'd seen 1,000 times during arguments about household chores or vacation plans. "I don't know what you think you know, but I know you've been working late with Damon for 18 months. I know you've taken 17 out-of-town trips that coincided with his travel schedule. I know you've had dinner at the Meridian Hotel 43 times since last January." Her face went pale. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been paying attention. Finally." "Cole, you're being paranoid. Damon is my supervisor. We work closely together on major accounts. That's what senior analysts do." "Senior analysts open joint bank accounts in the Cayman Islands?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Lena's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time since I'd known her, she had no ready answer. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally. "Then you won't mind if I ask Damon about it." "You stay away from Damon." "Or what?" "Or I'll file for divorce and take Sophie with me." The threat hit exactly where she'd intended. Sophie was my anchor, the reason I got up every morning and the center of everything that mattered in my life. Lena knew that threatening custody was the one weapon I couldn't defend against. But she'd also just confirmed everything I'd suspected. "Get out of my office," I said quietly. "This is my house too." "Not anymore." She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for some sign of the man who'd once promised to love her forever. Whatever she saw there made her step backward. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's just getting started." She left, closing the door harder than necessary. I heard her moving around in our bedroom, then the guest room, then the bathroom. Water ran for a long time. Eventually, the house fell silent. I opened my laptop and began composing emails. The first went to a divorce attorney whose name I'd found online. The second went to my bank, requesting account statements for the past 2 years. The third went to my boss, asking for a personal day. The fourth email sat in my drafts folder, unsent. Subject line, SEC Whistleblower Report. Recipient, tipsisec.gov. I stared at the blank message body for an hour, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Once I sent this email, there would be no going back. No marriage counseling, no working things out for Sophie's sake, no pretending that love could overcome betrayal. But there would be justice. I began typing. The Meridian Hotel sat on the corner of 5th and Main like a glass monument to expensive taste, its lobby filled with leather furniture and abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. I'd driven past this building 100 times without giving it a second thought. Now it felt like the center of my universe. I told Lena I'd be in Chicago for a client meeting, a lie that came easier than it should have. She barely looked up from her laptop when I mentioned the trip, just nodded and said she'd probably work late anyway. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so predictable. Instead of driving to O'Hare, I parked 3 blocks from the hotel and waited. The coffee shop across the street had a perfect view of the Meridian's entrance, and the barista didn't seem to mind that I'd been nursing the same cappuccino for 2 hours. I'd positioned myself at a corner table with my laptop open, playing the part of a freelancer catching up on work. The truth was, I couldn't concentrate on anything except the revolving door that would eventually deliver my wife into view. She arrived at 6:15, 20 minutes after her supposed meeting time. Lena stepped out of her silver BMW, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, something that hugged her figure in ways that made my chest ache with a combination of desire and disgust. She'd had her hair done that afternoon. I recognized the sleek styling from her usual salon, and she moved with the confident stride of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. Damon's BMW pulled up to the valet stand 30 seconds later. I watched through the coffee shop window as he emerged from his car, straightening his tie with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never had to park his own vehicle. He was handsome in the way that money made possible: perfect teeth, expensive haircut, clothes that fit like they'd been tailored specifically for his body. They didn't acknowledge each other in the lobby. Lena walked to the elevator bank while Damon stopped at the concierge desk, probably picking up a key card. Professional distance maintained for the benefit of hotel staff who might recognize them. I paid for my coffee and crossed the street. The Meridian's lobby buzzed with the quiet efficiency of expensive hospitality. Business travelers checked their phones while tourists consulted guidebooks. A pianist played soft jazz near the bar, his music mixing with the low hum of conversation and clicking heels on marble floors. I approached the front desk with the confidence of a man who belonged there. "Good evening," I said to the clerk, a young woman with a practiced smile. "I'm supposed to meet my colleagues for dinner, but I think I missed their room number. Damon Vossel's party?" She typed something into her computer, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide guest room information." "Of course, I understand completely. Security policy." I pulled out my phone and pretended to check messages. "Let me try calling him. You know how these corporate dinners go, probably running behind schedule anyway." I walked away from the desk and found a seat in the lobby bar, ordering a whiskey and positioning myself where I could watch the elevator bank. The waiting was the hardest part. Every minute stretched like an hour. Every couple that emerged from the elevators made my pulse spike until I realized they were strangers. At 8:30, a different clerk took over the front desk. I waited another 15 minutes, then approached with a new strategy. "Excuse me," I said, affecting mild confusion. "My wife asked me to pick up something from her room, but I can't remember the number. Lena Merrick?" The clerk, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, checked his computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have anyone registered under that name." "Maybe it's under her maiden name, Lena Hartwell?" "No, nothing under Hartwell either." I frowned, as if genuinely puzzled. "She said she was staying here tonight. Maybe it's under her company name, Meridian Financial?" His expression shifted slightly. "Oh, you mean the corporate account. Yes, we have several Meridian guests this evening, but I still can't provide room numbers without proper authorization." "I completely understand. Could you perhaps call up to the room and let her know I'm here?" "What name should I give?" "Tell her Cole is in the lobby." He made the call, speaking quietly into his headset. I watched his face change as whoever answered responded. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, hanging up. "The guest asked that you wait in the bar. Someone will be down shortly." I thanked him and returned to my table, ordering another whiskey I didn't want. The alcohol sat untouched while I watched the elevator doors, wondering if Lena would come down alone or if Damon would accompany her. Neither happened. At 9:45, a hotel security guard approached my table. He was polite but firm, explaining that the guest I'd asked to contact had requested that I leave the premises. No scene, no drama, just a quiet request that I finish my drink and find somewhere else to spend my evening. I complied without argument, paying my tab and walking calmly through the lobby. But instead of going home, I drove to the parking garage across the street and found a spot with a clear view of the hotel's main entrance. The wait stretched past midnight. I dozed fitfully in my car, waking every time headlights swept across my windshield. The city grew quiet around me, late-night traffic thinning to occasional taxis and delivery trucks. At 2:15 in the morning, Damon emerged from the hotel alone. He walked to his BMW with the satisfied stride of a man who'd gotten everything he wanted. The valet brought his car around, and he tipped generously before driving away into the empty streets. Lena appeared 20 minutes later. She moved differently now, less confident, more hurried. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and she kept checking her phone as she waited for her own car. When the BMW arrived, she slipped the valet a bill and drove away without looking back. I followed her home from a distance, staying far enough back to avoid detection. She pulled into our garage at 3:05. I waited another 10 minutes before driving around the block and parking in my usual spot. The house was dark when I entered through the front door. Lena had left her purse on the kitchen counter and her shoes by the stairs. I could hear water running in the master bathroom, a long shower that would wash away evidence I didn't want to think about. I went to my office and opened the laptop, adding tonight's data to my spreadsheet. Room 614, corporate account, 2:15 departure time for Damon, 2:35 for Lena. The numbers joined 46 other entries, a digital record of systematic betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text message from Silas. Package delivered. Check your email. The email contained a single attachment, a PDF file labeled Financial Analysis Summary. I opened it to find 23 pages of bank records, wire transfers, and account statements. Silas had traced the money trail from Meridian client accounts through a network of shell companies, all leading to the Cayman account that bore both Lena's and Damon's names. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Small amounts skimmed from investment returns, never more than a few $100s at a time. The money moved through 3 different companies, paper entities with official-sounding names like Strategic Asset Management and Global Investment Solutions, before landing in the offshore account. Total theft over 18 months, $437,000. I printed the entire report and locked it in my desk drawer next to the thumb drive containing the recovered text messages and photos. Evidence enough to destroy 2 careers and send 2 people to federal prison. The shower stopped running upstairs. I heard Lena moving around in our bedroom, probably choosing clothes for tomorrow's client meetings. In a few hours, she'd come downstairs and make coffee, kiss my cheek, and tell me she hoped my Chicago trip had gone well. I'd smile and say it had been productive. We'd discuss Sophie's school schedule and weekend plans, playing the roles of a happily married couple while we both pretended not to know that our marriage had become an elaborate performance. But the performance was almost over. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Damon's direct supervisor at Meridian Financial. Subject line: Urgent ethics concern regarding employee conduct. The message was brief and professional, requesting a confidential meeting to discuss potential violations of company policy. I mentioned that I had documentation to support my concerns and that the matter involved potential legal implications. I scheduled the email to send at 9 a.m., giving me time to change my mind if conscience or cowardice intervened. Then I went upstairs to the guest bedroom where I'd been sleeping for the past 2 weeks under the pretense of not wanting to disturb Lena's early morning routine. She was already in bed when I passed our bedroom door, pretending to sleep in the darkness. I could tell she was awake by the way she held herself too still, but neither of us spoke. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of my plan into motion. Phone calls would be made, meetings would be scheduled, and the careful structure of lies that supported their affair would begin to crumble. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. and tried to sleep, but my mind kept returning to the image of Lena walking out of the Meridian Hotel at 2:35 in the morning, her hair disheveled and her confidence shaken. She'd looked guilty. Finally. The call came at 8:15 on Monday morning, while I was reviewing quarterly reports and pretending my life hadn't imploded over the weekend. My assistant knocked on my office door with the expression she reserved for important interruptions. "Cole? There's a Michael Brennan on line 2. He says he's calling from Kellerman, Brennan & Associates about an urgent legal matter." I knew the name. Kellerman, Brennan and Associates was the kind of law firm that charged $800 an hour and specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. The fact that they were calling me meant Damon had moved faster than I'd expected. Cole Merrick, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Mr. Merrick, this is Michael Brennan. I represent Damon Vossel and Meridian Financial in various legal matters. I believe you know why I'm calling. Actually, I don't. Your behavior at the company Christmas party Friday evening, followed by certain allegations you've apparently made to Mr. Vossel's supervisors, constitutes actionable defamation. My client is prepared to file suit unless this matter is resolved immediately. I leaned back in my chair, surprised by how calm I felt. What kind of resolution are we talking about? A full public apology, written retraction of any statements made to Meridian's board of directors, and your agreement to cease all contact with my client and his family. In exchange, Mr. Vossel will consider not pursuing damages for harm to his reputation and career prospects. That's generous of him. Mr. Merrick, I don't think you understand the seriousness of your situation. Defamation of character, harassment, potential stalking charges, these are career-ending allegations. Mr. Vossel is a respected executive with an impeccable reputation. Is he? The pause that followed lasted just long enough for me to know I'd hit a nerve. I'm going to give you 24 hours to consider our offer, Brennan continued. After that, we'll be forced to pursue more aggressive legal remedies. Before you do that, I said, you might want to ask your client about SEC filing requirements for employees who violate company morality clauses. Another pause, longer this time. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating that Meridian Financial requires board notification within 72 hours of any verified misconduct by senior executives. The clock started ticking at 9 a.m. this morning. Mr. Merrick, have a great day, counselor. I hung up and immediately called Silas. The lawyers are circling, I told him. How solid is our documentation? Solid enough to convict them both if the feds decide to prosecute. The financial records alone would be sufficient, but combined with the communications evidence, it's airtight. Good, because I just declared war. The meeting with Meridian's board took place Wednesday afternoon in a conference room that probably cost more to furnish than most people made in a year. 12 executives sat around a mahogany table that could have doubled as a landing strip, their faces wearing the carefully neutral expressions of people who'd rather be anywhere else. I'd prepared for this moment like a lawyer preparing for trial. 47 slides, each one meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and verified. The presentation began with timeline correlations and escalated through financial irregularities before landing on the smoking gun. Bank records showing systematic theft from client accounts. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, advancing to slide 32, what you're looking at is 18 months of coordinated securities fraud, disguised as an extramarital affair. The room had been uncomfortably quiet before. Now it was silent as a tomb. Board Chairman Robert Kellner, a man whose white hair and stern expression made him look like Central Casting's idea of a judge, leaned forward in his chair. Mr. Merrick, these are extremely serious allegations. Yes, sir, they are. You understand that if these claims prove unfounded, you could face significant legal consequences? I understand that if these claims prove accurate, your company could face federal investigation, client lawsuits, and criminal prosecution of senior executives. Slide 35 showed the Cayman Islands account balance. Slide 36 displayed wire transfer records. Slide 37 contained screenshots of text messages between Lena and Damon discussing quarterly adjustments and client portfolio optimization. The affair was operational cover, I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. Personal meetings disguised as romantic encounters, hotel rooms used for private discussions about illegal transfers, a joint offshore account to hide stolen funds. At slide 40, the conference room door opened. Damon walked in with two lawyers, his face flushed red above his silver tie. He'd clearly been summoned from another meeting and wasn't happy about it. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, looking around the table at faces that had suddenly become very interested in their legal pads. "Mr. Vossel," Chairman Kellner said quietly, "please take a seat." "I'm not taking a seat until someone explains why this man is making presentations to our board of directors." "Because," I said, advancing to slide 41, "your employment contract contains a morality clause that requires disclosure of any conduct that could damage the company's reputation or expose it to legal liability." I clicked to the next slide, which displayed the relevant contract language in 18-point font. "And because," I continued, "the Securities and Exchange Commission takes a very dim view of investment advisors who steal from client accounts." Damon's face went from red to pale in the space of a heartbeat. He looked around the table, searching for allies who were suddenly unwilling to meet his eyes. "This is ridiculous," he said, but his voice lacked the confident authority I'd heard at the Christmas party. "This man is obviously having some kind of breakdown. His wife is a valued employee, and these allegations are—" "Documented," I interrupted, clicking to slide 42. "Bank records, wire transfers, account statements, text messages, hotel receipts, photographs, and audio recordings." The last item was a lie, but Damon didn't know that. His mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish pulled from water. "Mr. Vossel," Chairman Kellner said, "I think it would be best if you consulted with legal counsel before this discussion continues." "I don't need legal counsel. I need this lunatic removed from the building." He started toward me, his hands clenched into fists, his professional composure finally cracking under pressure. I stood to meet him, not backing down, but not advancing either. "Damon," I said quietly, "you really don't want to do this." He swung anyway. I'd played baseball in college, and some reflexes never fade. I stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him past me, then gave him a gentle push that sent him stumbling into the glass wall that separated the conference room from the hallway. The impact wasn't hard enough to break the glass, but it was loud enough to echo through the building. Damon bounced off the wall and landed on his hands and knees, his expensive suit wrinkled and his dignity shattered. Security arrived within minutes, summoned by the noise and the sight of a senior executive sprawled on the conference room floor. They helped Damon to his feet while his lawyers whispered urgent advice in his ears. "Gentlemen," Chairman Kellner announced, "this meeting is adjourned. Mr. Vossel, please report to HR immediately. Mr. Merrick, thank you for bringing this matter to our attention." I gathered my presentation materials while Damon was escorted from the room, flanked by lawyers and security guards. As he passed my chair, he leaned close enough to whisper in my ear, "This isn't over." "Yes," I replied, "it is." The board reached its decision before 5 o'clock that afternoon. Damon Vossel's resignation was accepted effective immediately. His access to company systems was terminated, his corporate credit cards canceled, and his parking pass revoked. The press release cited personal reasons for his departure, but everyone in the building knew better. Lena was terminated an hour later. I drove home through rush hour traffic, listening to news radio and thinking about the conversation I'd have with Sophie when she got home from school. She'd want to know why Mommy seemed upset lately, why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room, why the house felt different even when nothing had visibly changed. I'd tell her the truth, or as much of it as a 10-year-old could understand. Sometimes grown-ups made mistakes. Sometimes people chose things that hurt the people who loved them. Sometimes families changed, even when nobody wanted them to. But I'd also tell her that some things never changed, that I would always be her father, that I would always love her, and that none of this was her fault. The house was empty when I arrived, but there was a note on the kitchen counter in Lena's handwriting. "Staying at my sister's tonight. We need to talk soon." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then poured myself a bourbon and sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over our neighborhood. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork, custody negotiations and asset division, the messy business of dismantling a life we'd built together. But tonight, for the first time in months, the house felt peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you, NM. Nora Marlene, Damon's wife. Soon to be ex-wife, if I had to guess." I deleted the message and went inside to start dinner. Sophie would be home soon and she'd want to hear about my day. I'd tell her about the presentation I'd given at work, how sometimes telling the truth was scary but necessary. I wouldn't tell her about the federal investigation that would begin tomorrow, or the criminal charges that would likely follow, or the fact that her mother might be facing prison time. There would be time for those conversations later. Tonight, I just wanted to make spaghetti and help with homework, and pretend for a few more hours that some things in our world were still normal. The doorbell rang at 8:30. Through the peephole, I could see two people in dark suits holding badges, federal agents. I opened the door and invited them in, knowing that the next chapter of this story was about to begin.